making pie dough, we're gonna follow the recipe using half butter and half shortening to give it the great rich flavor of the butter and the flakiness of the shortening. Now this procedure uses a food processor, and we're gonna place about 2/3 of the amount of flour in the food processor, and then incorporate also our sugar and our salt. Once that's in there, we're gonna turn it on so that our dry ingredients are well dispersed. Just mix it for a few seconds, and then you're ready to add your fat. We're going to disperse our fat evenly over the top. I've cut the butter and the shortening in about 1-inch cubes, and we just want to mix it in with the flour so that it doesn't clump together. Make sure that your shortening, whoops, drop that in there. Make sure your shortening is nice and cold, because this is naturally softer than the butter. So we want, again, to place that into the flour mixture, separating that out. And we're gonna pulse this about 10 times until it starts to just clump up in the flour. Working with our ingredients very cold is going to be very important in order to maintain the fat in small particles in our dough. That's why I also have my water ready to go, and I've iced it already and then remeasured it so it's the appropriate amount. I'm gonna pulse this about 10 times just until the dough begins to collect in clumps. We wanna break down the flour, and it's just starting to collect in small clumps like this. So that's what I'm looking for my mixture. We do not want to overmix this because we still have to add the other ingredients. So what I'm going to do now is take a spatula and kind of move this around inside of the mixer to make sure that I have no real dry spots in there. So this is the texture that it should look like. Now there's one big large clump of fat, and I'm going to break that down just a little bit more with my hands. After you've mixed it around, I'm going to add in the rest of the flour, sprinkling that on the top. And we're going to pulse that just until it breaks it up about 5 times. Okay, so now I'm going to transfer this to a bowl, and that's where we're going to add the water. I'm going to take the dough from here and go ahead and place it into my mixing bowl. And then I'm going to just kind of mix it up. You can see all those beautiful clumps in there. That's what's really going to give us the nice flakiness of our dough. This butter is a little firm, so I'm going to break the larger pieces by hand so that they're more like a large pea size. Now what I want to do is I want to take my ice cold water and sprinkle it over the top, and you can do this with a rubber spatula or by hand to kind of like push it together to obtain a nice smooth dough. So I'm going to just sprinkle this over, holding back maybe just a little bit, and then get up in here with my hands and pushing down with the palm of my hand to really incorporate all the dry flour and the water into this dough. So it should hold together, and the goal is to be able to see those pieces of fat still remaining in the dough. If you feel like you've done this and it still is dry, go ahead and add the rest of your water. So I'm going to add that little bit more. Give yourself a large enough space to work in as well. So make sure your bowl is big enough, and this dough should just start to come together. And you can see all the spots in there that are still the fat. The dough is nice and cold, and I'm not overworking it. So I'm using, again, the palm of my hand to push it down, not the fingers, to mash it into a ball. So once you feel like this is ready to come together and there are no dry spots, we're gonna place this onto a piece of parchment or saran wrap and wrap this in a disc and place it in the refrigerator. So this dough is now ready to take out of my bowl and place onto my parchment paper. Again, ensuring that there are no dry spots. I'm gonna just create a nice round disc bringing it together and pushing it down. The fatter your disc is, the longer it's going to take to set, and we want this to chill in about 45 minutes to an hour max. So I'm just going to cover this here, place this into the refrigerator for about 45 minutes to an hour, and it will be ready to roll out for my pie. When you're ready to roll out your dough, you want to make sure you have everything in its place. So I have my rolling pin ready, I have some dusting flour ready, I have my baking beans for blind baking my crust. Anytime that you are doing a crust that has a liquid filling like the pumpkin pie filling, we want to par bake it. So I'll show you the process how to do that. So these are just some kidney beans that I use for baking. I have my pie pan ready to go, and then also a piece of parchment paper. So what I want to start with is getting my area ready to roll out my dough. The amount of dough that I made is for a double crusted pie or 2 single crusts. So I do want to cut this in half and then go ahead and keep the other one chilled, or you can freeze that for using at a later date. So you can see again all the speckles of fat, and I want to maintain that, so I need to work very quickly. So I want to flour my surface, gently form this into a round again without working it too much to warm the dough up, and then dust the top as well. When I'm rolling this, I want to roll in one direction only and then turn my dough each time a quarter turn, making sure that the bottom is not stuck to the cutting board, so that I constantly are adding a little bit more flour, but not a large amount to dry it out. So I'm always rolling forward and backwards, again, maintaining a round shape. So kind of shaping those edges as I continue to roll. And if the dough starts to stick because the butter is coming through, we want to make sure that we dust the top lightly, move it over, dust the bottom, so there is no sticking to my surface. Once my dough is rolled out, I'm looking for about 1/8 of an inch thick, and that's something you're just going to have to feel for, get up underneath the dough. And then we're going to roll this back. Now I have a little section here that's a little too long, and so what I want to do is I want to just trim that off because I know it's not going to be useful, and I want to make sure that my pie pan will encompass, the dough will encompass all the pie pan and go up the sides and give us a little bit of an area to crimp. So that's a perfect size right there. Now to get it into the pie pan, I want to place my rolling pin here, pull it backwards, and then very lightly lift it up, place my pan right underneath, lean forward to look, make sure it is hanging over, and then go ahead and unroll it. If this happens, don't worry about that because we will actually go ahead and fill that gap with the excess dough. You want to lift the dough and make sure it goes inside of the pan, and then pushing it with the side of my finger to really make sure that there are no gaps between the pie pan and the dough. This is really important so that it doesn't shrink and fall into the pie pan. Okay, so now with a little bit of excess, I'm going to place that right on top of there so that I will not have any leakage with my filling. Do that if you have any tears. Now what I want to do is I want to take a scissors and cut the edge just a little bit so that I have some to tuck over, and I'm going to do a crimp edge to this. So just with the kitchen shears, I'm going to give myself about 1 inch overhang, or actually about a 1/2 inch overhang should be sufficient. And just go around the whole outside edge and cut it so that it's just barely overhang. Don't go too short, otherwise you will not have enough to crimp that edge. All of this excess dough can then be chilled again and re-rolled for later use. So clean up your space. And then what you want to do, the next step is to tuck this dough up underneath slightly, have it leaning on the edge of the pie plate all the way around. So do this all in a circle first. So that gives you a little bit more of a thickness of an edge and allows it to crimp and hold its shape a little bit better. So again, I'm leaning it up just on the top of the pie pan, of the lip of it. Once that is all crimped underneath, we're going to take our our knuckle of this finger and then our 2 fingers here and be able to create an indentation. My dough is a little warm, so I could put it back in the refrigerator to hold its shape a little bit better. But I'm just going to be careful and really make that nice indentation. So again, it is still sitting on the lip of the pie pan, but now it's going to have a decorative edge. All right, at this point, once you have your edge complete, you want to chill this for about 30 minutes before it goes into the oven. You never want to place this dough directly into the oven from this stage because it basically, you just gave it a workout and it needs to relax and the gluten needs to actually just calm down and be able to hold its shape when it goes in the oven so it doesn't shrink on you. So that's a really critical part of this process. So from this stage, it's going to go into the refrigerator. Before I do that, I can prepare it so it's ready to go into the oven right away by placing my parchment paper directly over the center, lifting up the edges not to mess up my crimp that I just did, and then go ahead and pour my beans in the center here. We want just over a single layer of beans to really help press it down so the dough does not inflate in the center. This will help keep that dough down, make it not bubble up, and then we're ready to bake. So I'm going to chill this for 30 minutes and then it's going to go directly into the oven. All right, our pie crust is ready to go into the oven. I always place my pie on a sheet pan so that it is so much easier to get in and out of the oven. I've just kind of curled my paper under a little bit, and this is going to go into the oven at 350 for about 20 minutes. We're going to remove at that point the beans and the paper and bake it a little bit longer so that it is a nice golden brown. After your crust has come out of the oven, you want to let it cool quite a bit before you pour your filling in. So now we're going to go ahead and make our filling. So what I want to do is just in a large bowl, pretty much mix everything together. My canned pumpkin, the eggs, I have egg yolks as well as 1 whole egg to give it the nice richness of a custard, but to also hold together with the egg whites. I have evaporated milk measured from the can. I also have brown and white sugar, as well as my spices that I've mixed fresh, salt, and a little bit of flour. We're just gonna literally stir everything together in the bowl and pour this into the crust. So I'm going to take my well-baked crust with my filling and use your best judgment. If your crust is a little low, then you only want to put as much filling as it will hold. Don't overflow it. So that looks about good to me. And we're going to place this into the oven and bake this for about 40 minutes to an hour, depending on your oven. It should be set and not jiggle like this. So we're gonna check it in just a little while. Once the pumpkin pie is done and set, you wanna let it chill for a little bit, and then you can go ahead and decorate it with some whipped cream. So I've just made some cinnamon whipped cream. We're gonna put some rosettes all the way around the edge. This pie can be stored in the refrigerator for a couple days, but it is best eaten as soon as it is made after it has been cooled. So now you can cut in between each one and you can decorate the top as well. So that is our pumpkin pie.